So we have a little time, right?
Yes.
Because we really want you to be part of this conversation. We would like to start by asking you to tell us, in general, what brought you here, what you think about this idea of brain health, what you think of some of this stuff we've already talked about. So let's ask you what you think about brain health. Very broad, I know, very non-specific, but somebody needs to break the ice and start. Yes?
I'll break the ice.
So tell us who you are.
Sure. Hi, I'm Liz Nielsen from the Division of Behavioral and Social Research at the National Institute on Aging. And I love the framing and resonate very much with all of the principles that you outlined. I wanted to just add a piece that's from a large research network that we've been supporting together with Bruce McEwen and some of the other participants in the workshop on midlife reversibility or later life reversibility of risk associated with early life adversity. And I think the layer that we would impose upon this the discussion from that network is the idea that the shaping of brain health starts very, very early in the lifespan, perhaps even with intergenerational effects. And so that it becomes important for us to think about individual differences in those trajectories of both biological embedding of the social environment as well as the potential for plasticity or the particular kinds of interventions that might promote positive plasticity depending on one's individual life history and exposures throughout the lifespan. So I think, as you say, when we think about resilience, there are multiple ways and multiple contexts, but there are also multiple life histories that are a thread that you carry with you, and maybe the imprinting of, extreme adverse exposures, but also there might be possibility for positive imprinting as well.
Right. So I think you're making a really important point that the way the environment, which I kind of very briefly touched upon, by saying epigenetic, the way the environment impacts us actually can change the way our genomes function. And there's some evidence that it's even transmitted between generations. And once you carry that with you, you're carrying it. It's not like going to reverse very easily. So then the question is, are there other opportunities to reconfigure not that particular program, but counterbalance that program? And I think midlife, and this point about when hormones change, actually, for women, women think of menopause as sort of a bad time, but I think it's another time to rewrite the story sometimes, So thank you. Yeah. Any other thoughts and comments? It can be very broad, not very scientific, personal or general.
So I'll jump in here. I'm Damien Fair. I'm also on the planning committee here. And one of the things that I'm from Oregon Health and Science University in the Behavioral Neuroscience Department there. But one of the things as we're trying to zero in on the specific definition of what we mean by brain health, I think one of the most important things is to ground how our thinking is, what do we care about? What are the outcomes? What are the final pathways? Cognitive decline, obviously mental health disorders, but also things like quality of life. What are the endpoints that we care about that give us some grounding to think about? Well, then what does that mean? What aspects of the brain, relate to that? Sometimes we get caught up a lot of times in a lot of the vernacular and just some kind of fuzzy or squishy language that sounds good, but it's kind of really defining kind of the endpoints, the targets to help us define it. Well, like I said, I just threw out a few of them just right now. Of course, mental health, in the aging is cognitive decline, but also just very basic aspects of the quality of life. I don't even, these are things I'm asking actually in many respects because I don't really know the answer to all of these. But I think it's really important, at least for me, to think about how to think about this particular question.
Yeah, we all need help in defining it. One is the absence of disease. I mean, in general health, somebody is healthy. They're not sick. So it's the absence of something. So the absence of all these disorders is one way to define it. But there might be other ways to define it that are more positive. So we would love to hear that from you, or anything else you want to say.
Hi, I'm Molly Wagster. I'm with the National Institute on Aging. I just wanted to bring up some activities that we have ongoing that parallel some of the questions and goals for this workshop here today and tomorrow. A couple of years ago, the NIA, along with the McKnight Brain Research Foundation, supported a third Cognitive Aging Summit, and the focus of that summit was on resilience and reserve. And one of the things that came up multiple times during that summit meeting was the sort of complaint of the speakers and the participants that we all have different definitions of brain reserve, cognitive reserve, resilience, resistance, compensation, and that how important it would be for the community, both here in the U.S. and internationally, to try to come up with uniform definitions of these concepts, constructs, in order to be able to apply them and to be able to move forward in research positively. And so this was a recommendation-generating summit, and from that recommendation came that we should try to operationalize these things because they are so difficult, such difficult concepts. And the NIA was fortunate enough to be able to turn that recommendation, that particular recommendation, around into a funding opportunity announcement that then resulted in an award that was made about a year and a half ago to a group of investigators who have what we call a network grant. And they are using this to generate, through workshops, through work group meetings, through a variety of activities, to try to generate over the next 3 years, or 2 years left on it now, some kind of uniform or consistent consensus definitions of these terms. So I just wanted to make the group aware that this is... Well, that's to be determined, but it's in the. We may end up with a different set of terms or a narrowed down set of terms. In other words, some of these may be overlapping, used different terms used in the same way by different people. So what one person might use as reserve, another one may use the term as being resilient. Then there's the compensation, and whether or not compensation is being used in very similar ways across these constructs. So the bottom line being is that these terms are out there. They're going to visit this from a construct perspective first, and then try to bring us back to the consistent terms that people can agree on that would be used across them.
Yeah, I think it would be good.
Well, is that the Jakob Stern?
Yes, it is. So the mention is that the PI of this particular grant is Jakob Stern from Columbia University, and he's assisted by really a blue ribbon group of individuals who are the executive committee or steering committee of this activity. We just had our first workshop. It was held about 2 weeks ago, I think, here in Bethesda. And there is one planned for about this time next year. The dates are already set in mid-September, and that workshop will also be in Bethesda. Again, in the spirit of trying to move toward consensus on these definitions.
Is this a combination of neuroscientists, public health people?
Absolutely. It is, and it's also a combination of people who are working in animal models as well as in human research.
Right. So thank you.
Okay.
So do people have their own definition of feeling healthy, brain-wise? No? Maybe?
It's more, I don't know that people describe it as brain healthy. I think we do have sort of more in reaction to the comment about how do we quantify or specify what we mean by these terms of quality of life. There is a rich literature and scientific agenda around capturing the dimensions of life quality and well-being and purpose and social connection and all of those factors that I think, sometimes when we delve into the biology and the brain, we tend to sort of leave that side a little fuzzy and get very precise when we get into the biology and the brain measures. And I think we need the same precision on both sides of the equation. But there's been, supported by the National Academies, also quite a lot of exploration on measurement of subjective well-being and how can we clarify the differences in different subpopulations who may prioritize different aspects of well-being or have different opportunities for well-being. So I think, contextualizing that. Some people may have much more opportunity, for example, to live a purposeful, goal-striving life and rate that as the most important thing for their well-being, while other people may be limited to just merely enjoying the pleasures of daily social interactions.
So, thank you. This is a really important point. So, a few years ago, I was asked to give a talk to women neuroscientists, and I decided that everybody, when senior women are talking to younger women, they often complain about how hard life is for women in science, and I decided I needed a more positive message. And I thought, well, there must be a biology for how we achieve well-being, and we're doing this awesome work, and why aren't we happier, right? And so I started searching the literature on the biology of joy, happiness, and so on. I work on stress and addiction, and I thought there has to be a counterpart. There is a lot about reward in neuroscience, but usually it's immediate reward, like food, candy, whatever, but drugs. But this concept, is there a brain circuit for joy? The way that we think about a brain circuitry for stress is really not very clear. But yet it's a feeling we feel, and it's different from reward. It's not exactly the same. So to your point, I'm meandering, but to your point, I went back then and looked at this question of joy, happiness, reward, and there is an entire psychology, positive psychology, that talks about different ways that people achieve a sense of fulfillment. Sometimes it is living a good life internally yourself. Sometimes it's being engaged and having purpose, and so on. So there are these definitions. And one big gap, since our job is to talk about research gap, is to think about how the life of a person living a purposeful life is, how the brain is different versus somebody who is not. And somebody who reports feeling joy and contentment, not just contentment, but active joy on a regular basis, how that brain is different from somebody who's just neutral and bland. So as we talk today, and that's the reason why I wanted to talk about resilience and not just the absence of vulnerability. I think in my own life, I think about this idea of affective algebra, where I think that there is no life without negatives. So it's a matter of how the positive and the negatives are balancing each other so that your algebra comes out on the positive side. And so, but what does that take biologically across individuals and in a personal life? And how do we go about understanding, quantifying that? I think we do need to study more the brain and other aspects, behavior, biology, settings of people who report feeling good in their lives, in spite sometimes of some real adversities, like, being paralyzed or etc., having a sick child. Some people are still fine, and some people are miserable even though you line up everything and you don't understand why. So, yeah.
I'm just going to follow up on that. I think that this is really kind of the crux of it. It's really trying to figure out and teaming up kind of folks in various disparate parts of the scientific spectrum to figure out very precisely the reliability, exactly the measurements that we're talking about. Because really, if we're really trying to study this stuff, it's all about what's the specific thing that you're measuring. Right. And there are folks who actually do all that work on to study happiness and joy and have been thinking about these questions for a long time, but they're just not they're not linked up
Correct.
with the people who are
Yeah,
doing
we need to
the studying the
connect the
brain.
dots.
So it's like really trying to figure out how do you kind of integrate that, more efficiently, so people can make and so we get past just the language, so to speak. Right?
I agree. So I thought maybe we should give you a few minutes bio break before we start at 10:30. No? You can take a break. Yeah. Okay, but we need to start at 10:30. There is like a hard line there because there is a remote connection. Thank you.